Welcome to the Chicago Money Show. We help you get informed, feel engaged, and have fun with your finances. I'm your host, Bridget Sullivan Mermel. I own a fee-only financial planning practice in Chicago. Our guest today is Ann Logue. She's an investment expert with a long list of credentials, including authoring 5 money books. She's written Day Trading for Dummies, which is in its 4th edition, and the original publication of Socially Responsible Investing for Dummies. We're really pleased to have you here today. Hi, Ann.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. We're going to talk about day trading, cryptocurrency, and investing to make the world a better place. At least we'll probably be talking about more on top of that. And we're taking your calls too. So if you're watching this live, call the number below and give us a good question. So let's start, Ann, with day trading. My teenager came to me and said that they want to start day trading. What do I do?
Yeah, I've had this question a lot, and it's a little scary because you want to be able to introduce your kid to money, to investing, to how the markets work, to why they should want to do it when they're in a position to do it. But I think recently we've seen a lot of day trading that really is gambling, that's people playing around. A lot of the stuff on the Wall Street Bet subreddit or, the other conversations people are having, I think could end badly if people don't understand the risk. So I think there's a lot of ways to give, if you know somebody who wants to get started or you want to get started, I think you need to start by doing a lot of just basic research on how the financial markets work, what different brokerage accounts offer, what the difference is between short-term trading and long-term investing, and more information about some of the stocks before you start buying them. Because we've seen a lot of weird game playing happen. And I think that's concerning. I like Morningstar. They have a lot of good basic financial information on their website. And that's a good way for people to learn more about this market. And then I think as people get into it, if they want to trade, the general guideline is no more than you can afford to lose if you're trying to do this yourself. If you are older than a teenager and you have a job with a retirement plan, you want to invest in the stock market, in a mutual fund that's going to be broadly diversified and have some professional oversight. But if you're just trading for the heck of it or because you want to learn, start with no more than you can afford to lose. You might hit it really lucky, you might not. And in fact, there are a lot of traders who say that the worst thing that can happen to you is that you make money on your first trade because then you think it's easy.
Right. It's like the gambling. That gets back to the same thing with gambling. You don't want to do it. Yeah. So it seems like to me, one of the things that I would say is what's the difference between I'm interested in a stock and I just want to buy it and day trading. Mm-hmm. So it seems like if I was to answer this question, I might say, okay, think about a stock you might want to buy and think about what stocks you want to buy before we get into day trading, just getting into the stock market, especially if we're talking about it, we're talking to my teenager about it. Yeah. One of the other things I could say is that one of the pluses these days is that it's pretty easy to start small. Mm-hmm. So why don't you tell us about that? If you wanted to start small, okay, how would you, okay, so I've got $100.
Okay. Well, let's start with clarifying, when we talk about day trading. Day trading is in a position less than 1 day.
Great.
So you're really trading price movements and psychology more than the values of the company.
Great.
Now, and we would talk about swing.
Okay, so
trading.
we've got a call, and so we're going to take a caller. So
Okay.
caller, I want you to tell me your first name and what neighborhood or area of Chicago you're coming from, and then go ahead with your question.
Hi, my name is Rob, and I'm calling from Ukrainian Village. I have a quick question about day trading. I am actually getting closer to retirement, probably like 10 years, and I'm just wondering, do you have any tips for someone who's a little older, not so young, but, that any tips on day trading for someone who's a little older, closer to retirement?
Great. What do you think,
Hi,
Ann?
Rob. I think that as you get closer to retirement, day trading is a little bit riskier because, again, when you start talking about the idea of don't trade more than you can afford to lose, most people who are close to retirement can't afford to lose a lot of money in their retirement account. Again, if you segment this, and this is separate money, this is money that maybe you would have taken to Las Vegas, but you're not going to Las Vegas. That's a little different. And then day trading, trying to play these short-term market moves, or swing trading where you're trying to play over events that are going to happen in the course of a week or two, that might make sense, but I don't think that's going to make sense for the retirement savings that you're going to need, that you're going to rely on. As you get closer to retirement, a first thing is to try to maximize the amount of money in your retirement accounts. And there are what they call catch-up contributions, but you're actually allowed to make larger contributions after the age of 50 than you can when you're younger. You want to stay in the stock market. You want to be somewhat diversified. I'm sure Bridget can give you far more advice on how to diversify. Yeah. But you do want to stay in the stock market because that's going to help you beat inflation, but not maybe with as much risk as when you were younger. And I think you also need to think about, some other just basic financial planning stuff becomes a lot more important as you get closer to retirement.
And my 2 cents would also be think about day trading in terms of other things that you might be interested in. And maybe, okay, I'm going to spend less money on this thing that I like to spend money on. So I like to spend money on clothes. Okay, so I'm going to spend less money on clothes this month, and maybe I'll try to buy a stock. And I'm going to just buy a stock and hold on to it. So that would be a good way to wade in and start learning, And then if I like that, then I start doing more. So that's what, and I don't stop investing in my 401k. And your suggestion of invest more in your 401k is a great idea. And so it's keep it in. Okay, great. And we've got another caller in. So let's caller again, give us your first name and let us know what neighborhood you're calling from. We'd love to hear from you. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, I was curious if you could maybe give an explanation on cryptocurrency.
Great. Love this question. You're helping us here. That's going to be our next topic. So, Ann, why don't you tell us about cryptocurrency? This is something I know you know more about than I do.
Yeah, cryptocurrency is really interesting. The initial, well, if we go back, there's actually a paper that was published by the Federal Reserve System in 1998 about trying to find secure ways to do payment over the internet. And the basic idea started with, how do you guarantee in a system that's pretty open, where everybody's on and off, how do you guarantee that payments take place? How do you guarantee that people deliver on their promises for trading money or goods or whatever? The basic idea, the real cryptocurrency itself is Bitcoin. And that emerged as a computer science project by a person or persons calling themselves Satoshi Nakamoto, which is more or less a Japanese equivalent of a name like John Doe, very generic name. And there's a lot of, it's combining two things. It's combining the idea of how you have this secure payment system, but it also has a lot of theories about the value of money. And a big part of the idea, why they call it cryptocurrency, is the idea was that you would mine Bitcoin, mine in quotation marks, by solving a series of increasingly difficult computer problems. So, and your reward for solving the problem would be some Bitcoin. And the problems initially were easy enough that a skilled programmer working on a home computer would have no trouble doing it. Now they've become so complex that they use enormous amounts of power to generate.
So your computer is taking a lot of electricity? Is that what you mean by power? Okay.
Mm-hmm. But it's at the point, I mean, there are people that are operating giant server farms in Iceland because Iceland has basically free electricity and it's easy to control your internal temperature to keep it from getting hot.
Okay. So then
make it cost effective.
What do you do with this Bitcoin? Can you go and buy a cup of coffee with it?
Right.
Or
so
is this like...
Right. If you get Bitcoin, you can keep it or you can sell it. And then there's a lot of people who are willing to buy it. But this is the question about what do you do with it?
Okay.
Right now, it has some applications for trade. It's been used a lot in countries that have destroyed their currencies, like Venezuela.
Okay.
It's been used in the illegal trade.
Right, because it's hard to trace.
Right.
So people tax evaders.
Yes.
know, I think there are people that hate taxes and don't want to contribute, to any taxation. Seem to really love, be attracted to this.
Yeah. It's been used for ransomware.
Right.
It's been used for some drug trades.
So it's pretty dark right now.
Yeah, not entirely.
Okay.
But the reason though that it is because right now it doesn't offer significant advantages over traditional currency.
Right.
Except for the people who most value the anonymity are likely people who are doing things that they shouldn't be doing.
Right. Okay.
Again, if you're in a place like Venezuela, the math is a little different because the national currency isn't functioning.
So it seems like something that we should keep an eye on. And people are trading it now, and the trading is going through the roof at some days. But to me, do you see it as any different than gambling, or how do you distinguish it from gambling, the trading on cryptocurrency?
Yeah, it's very strange because the underlying technology, what they call the blockchain that's used to track the transfers of cryptocurrency, that has enormous applications. We're already seeing there's some companies that are trying to develop internet security systems using blockchain, inventory control systems, because you can track your chain of command, your chain of custody easily. There's also a lot of intellectual property controls that are enormous. We're seeing this with the little bubble about non-fungible tokens, or NFT.
Okay, that's okay.
And that, as an author who has dealt with pirated copies of my books, I like that idea.
Yeah, okay. Right. So it seems like something that might come into play, but the current state of it isn't necessarily.
The coins themselves, I mean, they're good for day trading or semi-gambling because, you can play short-term price movements, but there's not a lot of underlying value to any particular coin.
Right. Like you can't go buy coffee.
Not really easily in the United States.
Right. Yeah, like maybe in Venezuela. Right.
Maybe in Venezuela you can buy coffee. The other thing is that governments are working on their own versions of it. The Federal Reserve is working on its own version. So it would be essentially a dollar that you could trade online, or that and you would have the ability to track it. You would have greater security.
So
it might prevent a lot of hacking and theft.
It's interesting too, because that's how that underlying technology that you're talking about could get like used, or the governments that are working on it might want it. I'm just speculating. I don't know about that. Okay, so we're going to switch our focus now. Okay. So let's switch away from day trading, away from Bitcoin, to the other end of the spectrum, which is known as socially responsible investing.
Yeah.
So first, can you tell me more about, like, what does that mean? That's a question that I get a lot. Like, so what do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's something that I think is more personally interesting to me than trading, but trading is something that everybody else is interested in. So I'm like, okay,
I totally agree. Yeah.
There's a market, hit the bid, as they say. But I think socially responsible investing is something that doesn't have a clear definition, and that's unfortunate. It's finding a way to invest in alignment with your values, or with some sort of societal values that are important. And sometimes when it's done right, it can really help people make changes. It can help companies operate better. It can help investors. It can help new markets open up, like markets for alternative fuels. So that's good, right? I mean, in that sense, it's pure capitalism. It's the people who have the money are trying to force change, and they're using the power of their dollar to do it. When it's done poorly, it becomes situations where people are avoiding certain assets, or even avoiding the market entirely, and they're not getting the kind of return that they need on their money, and they're not really doing anything to make a difference.
Right. Good point.
Yeah, like, it's one thing to say, I don't want to invest in tobacco companies, and it's like, okay, but Altria is still going to be producing cigarettes because there's a demand for them. So you're not investing, isn't changing anything. And also, the reality is that tobacco companies make a lot of money.
Right.
And it's like, okay, what are you going to invest in instead?
Right.
And
so let's say you've got a 401k, for instance.
Right.
And you were like, I like this idea of investing according to my values. How would you proceed?
The first thing would be to see if your employer offers some kind of a socially responsible fund. If they don't, you'd want to ask the Human Resources Department if they can add it.
Right.
Companies have to have some kind of a worker committee to choose retirement plan assets, and you can ask about how to get on it.
Yeah, I looked on Morningstar before, and I don't know for sure that they still have this, but it seemed like you could, on Morningstar, get a sustainability rating for a lot of mutual funds, not necessarily all of them, but you could look on your 401k. Okay, here's my list of possible offerings, and then look on Morningstar and see if they had sustainability ratings for them. So that's one thing that I've done in the past.
And I think that's a good idea, because something else, like, you don't want socially responsible to be just branding. And there are a lot of corporations that are following good socially responsible principles, especially multinational corporations. The European Union is requiring...
They're crazy, We're not crazy.
Yes.
Far ahead of the U.S. on it, let's put it that way.
Far ahead of the U.S. That means anybody who's doing business in the EU is already forced to start paying attention to things like carbon output, or worker treatment, or community externalities. They're being forced to look at these things. So any fund that has a lot of multinationals in it, which is just about any large cap fund, is going to be
looking at it, right?
Yeah, it's going to be more socially responsible than average, just because they're doing business in Europe.
Okay, so then next step, say you're closer to retirement or you're in retirement, and instead of this 401k where you only have the, certain number of investment options, but you have a lot more investments. You're at say Fidelity or Schwab or one of the other large brokerage or Vanguard, and you want to do socially responsible investing there. What are you've got an IRA. What are your or a taxable account? What are your thoughts there?
Sure.
How do you dig into this?
Yeah, there's some different ways to look at it. Like, again, if your goal is to provide capital to make certain market sectors more viable, there are a lot of exchange traded funds that specialize in things like environmental technologies or carbon remediation. And the fact that they are looking to invest in companies that do that means that it is easier for companies that do that to raise money.
Right. And my 2 cents on that would also be you don't have to go all or nothing. So you can put a certain amount of money or maybe 5% of your portfolio in something like that while maintaining a well-diversified portfolio also. Like you don't have to say, okay, I'm putting it all in this exchange-traded fund that builds water structures in developing countries. You know, that wouldn't be prudent advice. No. That's not what I would say. But researching it and doing some so that you can encourage it and show that there's investors that want to contribute to this, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. And another thing to think about is it doesn't even have to just be your investments. It can be your bank account.
Good point. This is one of the things that I love about your thoughts right. on this. Yeah.
Credit unions are extraordinarily socially responsible. Right. They tend to have low fees. They're really, they invest heavily in their communities.
We've got sometimes. Caller.
Right.
We've got another caller. So let's take our next caller. So if you can give us your first name and your neighborhood, then proceed with your call. We'd love to hear your question.
Hi, this is Katie. I live in Roscoe Village.
Right.
And I have my personal account, checking and savings account in one of the big banks that has a lot of investments in big oil and other non-socially responsible industries. And I've considered moving those accounts over to like a community bank or a credit union. And I'm just wondering if that has, how to kind of evaluate the impact of that versus moving my investment money over to a socially responsible fund.
Great.
Yeah.
This is a good question.
Yeah, that's one reason why sometimes it's easier for people in retirement to do that is because the big banks do have that convenience, Right. There's a branch everywhere. And especially if you're working, if you're dealing with families, issues, having to go a couple extra blocks out of your way can be a hassle. So there is the convenience fee. You want to look at things like where are the cash stations? Are they close to where you are? In terms of use
bill pay app or whatever. Yeah.
Right. In terms of your debit card, almost everybody's in a Visa or a MasterCard network, so that shouldn't be a difference. And credit unions tend to invest in local communities. They tend to loan out the money that comes in.
They're membership owned. So they're owned by you're an owner when you're doing it. It's not like a bank that it has to pay out money to their investors.
Mm-hmm. So they tend to have lower fees and they tend to have lower interest rates on mortgages and car loans, which makes them really accessible to people who are in the neighborhood or who work business that participates.
Right.
And that does help get some more social responsibility into their investing. And depending on the neighborhood, they can be a significant factor in helping people afford mortgages and stay and contribute to the neighborhood.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like, so you can get, if you have a local community bank or a local community development bank, that those are specifically going to invest more in the neighborhoods than the large, big banks. The too big to fail banks. I'm not dissing them particularly, but they are less interested in investing in local houses, local businesses, etc.
I mean, it's interesting because they are required by law to do a certain percentage of what they community development. And usually what they do, the way they do that is by helping to finance community banks.
They also have that, there's a rating, I think it's a CRA, is that right? So you can actually check how much banks reinvest in their local community.
Yes.
By checking those ratings. So a couple more things I just wanted to mention that Morningstar is a Chicago company. But I wanted to ask you about, do you have to pay to get on the site? Or, because I do pay personally just because I've got a firm and so I'm using it all the time. So I'm just wondering if you're a consumer, what can you get? How far can you get? Do you know?
Some information is free. Some information is free, but you have to sign in. You have to have an account so they can track you.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about is if you're familiar with USSIF. So if people are looking for specific funds, that's one place that I've recommended. So they have listings. It's USSIF, or I don't know what SIF stands for. Like you were saying before, there's not uniform language because it's kind of a developing part of the financial industry. But USSIF has, if you're interested in no oil, no fossil fuels, and guns. So guns is another thing, and since it's such a big issue in Chicago, I thought I'd bring up, there's a website called weaponfreefunds.org. You can look and see how much your mutual fund or ETF invests in weapons. And it's kind of interesting also because it lays it out do they actually invest in gun manufacturers? Is it the weapons industry? Or is it peripheral Gander Mountain or some place that sells guns? And it helps to peel off the veil that says this is a black and white issue. So that's one of the reasons why I like that, because, most mutual funds, large mutual funds, are going to have General Electric or something that actually is a defense contractor. And so, there's not Nirvana, there's not some alternative Nirvana that you just haven't heard about, that if you just find it, you can invest in it.
Now, I'll tell you, there's been a really interesting movement, and this is something, if you're thinking about buying just one share of stock, there's been a movement. There's a local group called United Action for Power and Justice, I believe is their name. They're encouraging people to buy one share in the different gun manufacturers. And then because you're a shareholder, you are able to vote for your proxy. You are able to attend the annual meeting, and they are hoping that they can get people to influence policy. Like in Europe, guns have the triggers are matched to fingerprints, and only the person with the fingerprint can shoot it.
Right.
And that's standard technology in Europe. And we could have that.
Yeah. Right. Interesting. So the whole shareholder activism is another way to engage with this particular line of thinking. And it's effective. I mean, that's another thing about it. I think it maybe is more time consuming, but it is effective.
It is.
So we're going to wrap it up now. So thanks, Ann Logue, for being our guest on our show today. My name's Bridget Sullivan Mermel, and I own a Fielding financial planning firm. If you've got questions on this episode or for future episodes, please email us. And you can do that at ask@chicagomoneyshow.com. Thanks for watching.